Hello and welcome back once again to the Brass Investments channel. I haven't done a video in quite some time, and since my last video I've migrated all my videos off of YouTube and onto my own website where I can manage them better, have a lot more control over them, and be able to share them with my model railroad friends without any interruptions with advertising, tracking, and all that goes with the big tech stuff. I will continue to do videos maybe once a week, every 2 weeks, depending on how busy I am. A lot has happened since doing my last video. I've been very busy as a result and did not find time to record them, do the editing, and get them all prepped for viewing. Some of you may know already in the O-Scale community, I had the opportunity to acquire the All Nations business, and that was one of the things keeping me very busy, and my intent there is to revive the business and introduce it to new modelers and help entry-level modelers with their scratch building work by supplying parts and advice, documentation, etc. I'll be talking a little bit more about that experience in the future, but for today I want to talk about one of the models that I found in the All Nations collection that was very popular and I believe is still popular today, and we'll talk about that next. The model I want to talk about today, sitting in front of you, is the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad Western style wood caboose. In the All Nations collection, a good deal of it, along with tooling, are reference models. And the reference models were used so when kits were made, they were able to include all the correct parts and accessories into the box that made up a kit before selling it in the hobby shop. The CB&Q Western style caboose, also known as a way car, was a style of caboose constructed of wood that was very common on many railroads. What I have found from all the information that came with All Nations business, not only the documentation and tooling and dies, but such things as blueprints. A lot of the work that went into designing and creating a model before it ever came to market years ago was researched, and in those days they would actually get a lot of the drawings, mechanical drawings, from the railroad itself, and these drawings were very detailed, along with a lot of photos and the original blueprints from the CB&Q Railroad Engineering Department. This caboose was initially fabricated using cardboard and wood before ever producing the first casting that you would find in the kit. The original kit in the All Nation catalog was number 3612, CB&Q, and I have the reference kit with all the parts so that this caboose can be recreated at any point in time. Aside from being unique because it was all constructed out of wood for the most part, there's a few other items that make this model very interesting, and that would be the trucks. The trucks for this particular model are the 5-foot wood beam Caboose trucks, and the part number for those in the catalog would have been 3847. They came as a kit or unassembled, and the detail on the truck side frames is very good. I also believe Walthers had made the same type of truck. I happen to like the All Nations a little better than the Walthers for detail and accuracy, but in any event, this Caboose either came with those or I believe a leaf spring type truck. And to date, I hope to be able to supply these trucks in the future with this kit that'll be much improved. Unfortunately, the tooling for the truck side frames is still available in the collection. The way they produced these side frames was with a vulcanized rubber spin die, and that die looks to be in very good shape today and will allow us to supply side frames for future models. As you may know, this particular model has been around for many years and is in quite rough shape in terms of parts missing, like the roof walk, but it was in the box, and once the model was created, the castings were created for the various parts, like here and on the windows, on the platforms were all cast. This model probably stayed in the box, and the reference kit that was used for filling boxes to supply kits was the official reference. But this particular model would have been the prototype prior to ever creating the castings. So what I did was to carefully take a little bit of this model apart to study it. Here's the other side. This is a swath board embossed, so it looks like it's a wooden car. The windows and the frames are white metal, and if I turn the car around, you'll be able to see the basic framework, which is wood. Everything is wood. The roof is wood, the floor, the bracing here, the ends, and on the ends they have glued on embossed wood, and to finish out the ends with cast doors. Very dusty, and I'm trying to want to preserve this particular piece for the future. It pretty much followed the instructions. If you ever were to get a hold of the original kit instructions, where the modeler actually had to create this piece here to finish off the archway on the roof and glue it on, which would have been a piece of cardboard or paper. Here is another partially finished prototype that was with this kit, just to give an idea of how this was constructed in its day. This would have been the floor. These tongues here and here, these wooden parts, were actually had little brad nails to hold the end platform or decking here on the ends of the cars. And there was plenty of clearance for the truck. There was nothing fancy about the detail here. And this is swath board, again, like cardboard. And it was pretty good, I guess, in its day. Here is a second prototype that All Nations developed, and it is slightly different from the previous one I showed. Maybe it was their third or fourth attempt, but what's common about this and a little different than the previous or the original prototype model is they went ahead on the underside, in addition to using a cast bolster like this, which is on the ends, they were using a cast part of the center sill here to hold the coupler and the steps in the platform. I will get into a little bit further discussion on that further down the road, but this really tells us that this style of caboose was very adaptable, for example, for other railroads, and could be found with different window configurations, different types of detail, different interiors, and makes it an interesting option because if your basic measurements on your floor and your frames are the same and all you really need to do is change up the sides of the car and letter it, you'll find it very satisfying to be able to take a basic structural kit and kit bash it to your particular railroad that you want to model. After a good bit of study on all the documentation and these models, after I took them together, I started developing the parts in the CAD program to replicate the wooden parts. And what I found out, for example, on some of the wooden parts like the ends, they weren't totally accurate. Sometimes their measurements were off by a little bit. But in developing it in a CAD program, I could correct that and print those out on the 3D printer in different types of plastics. This happens to be a polycarbonate, very tough, high temperature plastic. And I did so for other parts of the car to start replicating this caboose for other modelers so they could have the same enjoyment that I'm having in creating this model. And so one of the first things we took a look at was the floor. And usually you would find models with no center sill, or they may utilize the center sill if it came with the kit. And I think later on it did. Originally it didn't. But in this case, what I decided to do was to create the floor with the center sill printed on it and add in the wooden detail so it looks like it's wood. And you'll note that on the original kit, they would use a bolster like this with screws and use wood screws, and you would see that on the underside. And as detailed as this little part is, the screw still didn't look good if you turned the car over. This truck kingpin was threaded with a 440 and a spring to hold the truck on. And so what I decided to do was to experiment a little bit using the original tongue to place it on here to mount the coupler. And so what I decided to innovate a little bit was to create the holes for mounting the bolster from the inside of the car so they wouldn't be seen on the underside. This particular floor on these cars measures approximately the same as the wooden one. Not sure if you can see that or not. And on this particular instructions that came with this car, the ends were to be nailed or glued on like this. I printed them in different colors so you could see in contrast how this is. And I've got these glued on very squarely. And I decided rather than the wood, which did not, the wood had a little bit of a, not embossment, but cutout for the door to sit in. But I decided to, with the CAD program, it was easy to cut out so that the door would snap right in there and the windows you'd be able to see clear through the door windows on this. Now, optionally, the modeler may want to use a part like this and mount it from the underside with the screws. I'm a little bit fussy. I decided, based on what I saw on this model and the Chicago Northwestern model that they put out, as well as the wooden bay window caboose, they had a casting that looked like this, approximately. Now that's got the brim on it from the print build plate, so I'll show you the one without the brim. And what I did is I printed the the nut for the 440 right in the plastic, and I printed the 256 nuts right here and here, so that if I wanted to, like I did on here, I just drilled the hole out a little bit so I could place this on there, put my 256 screw right there so they could be hidden. And then later on, if I wanted to do the interior, I have a skin that will lay over that so you wouldn't see the screws from the inside either. Now, on the skin, let me see if I can find that here. I have a box of parts here. The skin will just be really thin. It'll look like that, and I'll just trim the ends, and it'll lay right in there like that. And the wood floor looks almost like the wood floor decking on the underside. So that's an option. It would be an option. So there's a lot you can do when you have the ability to create very quickly the parts in a CAD program, if you have that skill, and print them out and fit them up. And so what I decided to do was to give the option of being able to use this part or go with the old style tongue, as I call it, and mount the coupler on that. Now, one word of caution: when you take a drill bit, a clearance drill bit for a 256, and open the hole here, which is very thin, please do hold it down on the drill press, because if you're holding it up to the bit will catch. And I used a bit to show you. It was a big fat bit. It'll grab and run right through on you, and you really don't want to do that. I was using a fat bit here to improve the chamfer here so that my countersunk screws would be level with with the bed here of the floor, and could be hidden with the skin that'll be laminated on this in the future. Now, I haven't put the bracing on this yet, and the bracing meaning on here, and this was initially my first attempt at trying to come up with the right measurements, and I decided that the original bracing in wood was a little too wide. So I trimmed it down a little bit and printed these bracings out so that it wouldn't hold the side of the car out. You would have a perfectly flat frame to mount the car side on. And to do that, I can show you the bracing. The bracing comes off the build plate. On the printer, this brim gets cut off or peeled off, and you have this, which will go on either side, and you just glue it up. And on these, I used a little bit of Walther's goo. You could drill and tap these if you wanted more strength, I suppose, but I don't see it necessary to do that. You're going to probably get more strength once you put the other parts on this and put the decking on, and then put your door in, and that'll be one of the items that you'll want to do. But before you go ahead and glue up these bracings, you want to take the roof, and I printed up a roof that looks quite a bit different than the wooden roof. The wooden roof, will have it all carved out here, so it has the nice arch. And I decided to open this up here in case I wanted to detail inside the car. And what I generally did in this case was I wanted to make sure that my measurements and this roof would drop right into place before I put on the bracing, which it does. If it was a little too strong, I could take a little bit of plastic off that. It's easier to remove than to add. And in that case, I think when this goes together, it'll fit very nicely. Now, one of the common things about these cars is this was the original side of the car. So again, this was the original side that was used on the model that I was talking about previously, that was the reference model, and I printed these sides up exactly on the 3D printer after I sketched them up in the CAD program. And the nice part about this is it was very relatively easy to go if I wanted a CB&Q way car with a baggage door, which they had. And you can see that they're interchangeable. And as a matter of fact, I made the same type of side for a Chicago Northwestern, which was a little slightly different window and door configuration. And I'm assuming here that the Chicago Northwestern caboose or way car was approximately on the same frame, although I know that the floor was slightly longer than this one. So I might change that up in the future, but for now, it's just nice to be able to interchange. And oh, by the way, since I'm a Chicago Great Western fan, I did sides for the Chicago Great Western, which look approximately like that. Now, when the roofs come off the printer, a lot of build support is required in order to get the curvature just right, in order to have a really clean build. And you'll see that since I printed flat on the print bed, you'll see a lot of line work, and it's not prototypical, but actually my intention was, and still is looking at the Chicago Northwestern roofs. I am going to use a flex plastic and laminate this flex plastic onto the roof to make it look more realistic, like a tar paper was used, before we put on roof walks and stacks, vents, and I think that will really be impressive. It's something you can do on a plastic model kit, whereas on the old wooden ones, before you ever got the final coat of paint on, you were going to have to take that wood part and probably prime it with maybe some lacquer and sand it out just so you seal it before you prime and put the finishing coat of paint on the car. And so I'm feeling like this is a good experiment, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. This plastic is easy to trim. If I want to take another piece like this, I would trim it out for the ends here. Once I have this part here constructed and ready to mount. Now, I may not want to mount it because a lot of modelers like to be able to take the entire roof off and look at detail inside the car. So that's another factor that I took into consideration. Now, some of the other detail parts that I have on the car are the skins for the ends. So in other words, when this car gets closer to completion, this will be laminated onto the ends of the car, just like the wood embossed would be. Now, you could still use the wooden embossed if you wanted, I suppose. But I'm kind of liking the print detail and the frame on these, and how I can improve the appearance, the way it looked on the real prototype. I have other parts, like on the underside for the toolbox or tool chest that may have been mounted. This would be the flex for the top of the cupola. We have long roof walks, short roof walks printed, and I think that this kit won't be too challenging for the entry-level modeler, and if you make mistakes, it's something that's probably easily correctable, and there's a lot of flexibility with this type of a kit, more so than I think with the original one that All Nations had put out. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll talk to you again in the next video. Now I'm going to show a close-up of both ends of the car with the two different types of treatment for mounting the coupler and the platform for the ends of the caboose. The first one is here. I have truck mounted on there, so you can see this particular end may be slightly higher than I would want it. The opposite end of the car with the original tongue that protruded to support the coupler is the perfect height when put up against the reference car, which we'll show here in a minute. Note that the braces that are glued from one end of the car to the other on both sides to support the sides are in place, and the roof fits very nicely. This is a shot with the roof off prior to placing it on top of the car after the braces, cross braces, have been glued in place. Presently, when we put the new model up against the reference model, we're right on the money as far as the roof is concerned. The tongue protruding out on the end of the new model for the platform, and the coupler is at approximately the right height. The coupler on the reference car is at the right height, but the tail is hanging down a little bit low. Should be adjusted, but I'm going to leave it as is for now. The other end is slightly higher, but that's not concerning me at this point. We'll see how this model finishes up a little later on down the road. Additional detail, of course, you're going to need window frames and with some small brass angle for the corners, and stick it in there with some glue to give it some strength and support. And when it's all done, it'll be nice and square. It'll come out of there probably better than if I tried to do it freehand. In addition, I may leave it in the jig and apply my roofing. So if I wanted to try to go for a model with some interior details, I printed this skin up with some simulated paneling or wood as though it was scribed, and my intention would be to simply put it on here and glue it down, which again you could use a rubber band around that to hold it in place till the glue sets. I have these in different colors, and then once that's glued down, the final lamination that I intend to use on the roof is the flex plastic, which will go on there prior to putting the final detail on the edges, which is the grab rails or irons, if you want to call it that, on the corners on the roof. And that would help complete this component, and when it's all done in the jig, it's ready to set on top of the regular roofing component, which would look like this, which does not have the final laminated roofing layer on it yet, but it will have. And that particular roofing layer will go on after this is positioned over the opening on the roof here. And so I may want to have this so that the parts can come off and you can see the detail inside the caboose if I decide to put some of the interior detail in. So I wanted to tag one last short video clip on the end of this CB&Q video that I did, just to follow up on some last minute things I did to facilitate putting more of the components together. And one of the things I did, of course, was build this out using a little jig. That was very helpful. The roof I laminated both on here and on here, and I did that quickly with a little Loctite spray adhesive. Do practice first because you want to get a nice even layer on both surfaces before you put them in contact, and that worked out very nice, and it was quick and easy. One of the things I did for the side, you'll notice it's a little on the rough side here. I'm a texture guy. I like surfaces that have some texture to it. A lot of my sides, when I print them, are perfectly smooth, and usually what I do is I will take the brim off, but like in the case of these sides, I decided to take a nice rather sharp file and just trim the tooth off both edges like here before mounting it. The roof does come off. The inside floor is down. I have not put on the couplers, and I put in the windows. So some of the work at this point, this is as far as I'm going to take this model right now because I have other pressing projects, but I did mount the platforms. I pre-drilled these here for all the handrails before mounting that, and the couplers are ready to go on. So the last minute details will probably do at a later time. Did want to say that I print these in different colors. This happens to be a purple red, as they call it. It's more of a deep red. I have a ruby pearl red that is a nice shade for these, but it gives you a rough idea how it might look when it's painted. Normally you would prime it, and maybe paint it in your CB&Q color and weather it, if you will. But that is pretty much the conclusion here, and we're getting close to putting this out as a complete kit.